The morning after Thanksgiving, I sat at my kitchen table in Sudbury with both hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago, and I couldn't bring myself to get up and warm it. 24 hours earlier, my granddaughter Isla had stood in the middle of my daughter-in-law's living room in her little burgundy dress. The one she'd picked herself at Value Village, because she said the color looked like fall leaves. And she had watched her two cousins tear open gift after gift after gift, while her own name was never once called. She hadn't cried, she hadn't asked why. She had just reached up and taken my hand very quietly, and when I looked down at her, she said 4 words in a voice so small I almost missed them over the noise of the room. "Grandma, was I bad?" I told her no. I told her she was perfect. And then I excused myself to the bathroom, turned on the tap so no one could hear me, and stood with my hands pressed flat against the cold porcelain sink for 3 full minutes. That night, I drove home with Isla asleep her car seat, her cheek pressed against the window, still wearing that little burgundy dress, and I thought, I am 54 years old. I have given this family the best years of my working life, quietly, without complaint, without a single invoice, without ever once saying the words I should have said a decade ago. I thought, that ends now. My name is Diane Kolchik. I am 54 years old. I live in Sudbury, Ontario, where I have lived my entire life except for 3 years I spent in Thunder Bay in my 20s trying to be someone other than who I was. I came back, I always came back. That's the kind of person I am, rooted, dependable, the one who stays. I have one son, Garrett. He is 31 years old. He married a woman named Petra 6 years ago, and they have 2 children together. Twins, a boy and a girl, both 8 years old. Garrett and Petra live 40 minutes outside of Sudbury, in a newer subdivision where every house looks almost identical, and the driveways are wide enough to fit 3 cars. They are not struggling. They have 2 incomes, a recently finished basement, and a vacation property in Muskoka they bought with help from Petra's parents. I also have a granddaughter named Isla. She is 6 years old. She is my daughter Sherry's child. Sherry and her husband split up when Isla was 2. Since then, Sherry has been raising Isla mostly on her own, working 2 part-time jobs, trying to finish her upgrading at Northern College. I help where I can. What that means in practice is, I pick Isla up from school 3 days a week. I keep her on weekends when Sherry has evening shifts. I buy her winter coat and her school supplies and, last year, her Christmas gifts, because Sherry was between jobs in November and December and had almost nothing. I love Isla the same way I love Garrett's twins. Completely, equally, without asterisks. I thought that was obvious. I thought it went without saying. I was wrong. Let me tell you about Petra's family, because you need to understand the landscape before I tell you what happened at Thanksgiving dinner. Petra comes from a family that treats celebration like a competitive sport. Her mother, Donna, is the kind of woman who plans themed holiday tables 6 weeks in advance. She's about her grandchildren the way sports commentators speak about athletes. With statistics, with pride, with rankings. Donna and her husband Ken have 4 grandchildren total, the twins and 2 kids from Petra's brother's side. They give elaborate gifts at every holiday. I mean elaborate. For Easter, they sent the twins an actual wooden play structure that required professional installation. For the twins' last birthday, it was matching electric scooters. Garrett and Petra had been hosting Thanksgiving at their place for the past 4 years. Every year, I brought food. I brought my mother's pierogies, the ones that take 2 days to make from scratch. I brought a butter tart square tray. I brought twice an entire smoked turkey, because Petra said she wanted to try something different and didn't have time to do it herself. Every year I sat at that table and watched Donna hold court and felt myself getting smaller in my chair. The way you do when you've spent your whole life being the person who shows up and does the work, and somehow still ends up on the outside edge of the room. But I stayed. Because of Garrett. Because of the twins. Because that is what I do. This year Petra had told me in October that the gathering would be small. Just immediate family. Donna and Ken were coming. Petra's brother and his wife, the twins. And me. She mentioned, almost as a footnote, that it would be great if I wanted to bring Isla, since Garrett's kids loved having a little one around. I asked her directly, should I bring something for Isla? Are the kids doing gifts? Petra said, and I remember this precisely, oh, it's really casual this year. Don't worry about anything formal. I took that to mean no gifts. I did not bring gifts. I arrived with Isla at 1 in the afternoon. She was wearing her burgundy dress and her good boots, and she'd let me braid her hair, which she almost never allows. She walked in holding my hand, looking up at the ceilings the way small children do in houses bigger than their own. Within 20 minutes I understood that I had made a mistake. There was a table near the window in the family room, and on it were 2 gift bags. Big ones, with tissue paper, orange and yellow autumn colors. The tags read to Lily and to Spencer, the twins' names. Donna had apparently also brought individually wrapped chocolates, and a maple syrup gift set for each child. Petra's brother had brought games, 2 of them, 1 per twin. Nothing had Isla's name on it. I scanned the room twice. I checked behind the table. I told myself what I always tell myself in those moments. There must be something I'm missing. Maybe they didn't know she was coming. Maybe Petra had something set aside. I smiled. I helped Isla take off her coat. I poured myself a glass of water. And I watched her trail after the twins into the playroom. Still not sure enough of herself to run. At 3 o'clock, Donna announced it was time to open gifts. The twins came flying out of the playroom like their feet were on fire. Isla followed more slowly, found me on the couch and sat down beside me. She tucked her feet under herself and watched. Lily opened a craft kit, the kind with resin and molds and little dried flowers to embed in clear pendants. It was beautiful. It was probably $60. Spencer opened an indoor hockey set with a real foam goal and a stick sized right for him. Then the chocolates, the maple syrup, the board games. Everyone cooed and clapped. Isla sat beside me the whole time. She didn't ask for anything. She clapped when the twins clapped. She is, by nature, a child who waits for permission before she takes up space. When the last gift had been opened and Donna was collecting the torn wrapping paper into a tidy pile, Petra walked past us and said, lightly, easily, as though it cost her nothing. "Oh, Diane, I should have mentioned. We kept it to the immediate grandkids this year, so we didn't want to make it complicated. Isla's welcome to play with the twins' new stuff, obviously. Welcome to play with their things." I didn't say anything. I put my arm around Isla and I felt her go very still under my hand. The way a child goes still when they've understood something they didn't want to understand. She looked up at me. "Grandma," she said quietly. "Was I bad?" I kissed the top of her head. I said, "You are the best girl I know. And I promise you and I are going to do something very special this week, just the 2 of us." We stayed another hour because I didn't want Isla to feel that leaving was about her, that she had done something wrong by being there. I kept her close. We played a card game at the kitchen table, just the 2 of us, with a deck I found in a drawer. I helped her build a tower out of the board game boxes that hadn't been opened yet. I made it feel as hard as I could, like a normal afternoon. We left at 4:30. On the way home I stopped at a Shoppers Drug Mart and bought her a coloring set. The good kind, with the thick markers and the designs that are a little more complicated than toddler stuff, because Isla has always been ahead for her age in that way. It cost me $14. She held the bag on her lap the whole drive home like it was something precious. That made the whole thing worse, not better. After I dropped her at Sherry's, I drove home alone. I did not turn the radio on. I sat at my kitchen table, and I did not let myself cry until I had done what I needed to do first. I got out a notebook. Legal size, yellow, the kind I've kept for bookkeeping since I started freelancing. Here is what you need to know about my working life. I spent 22 years as an administrative professional, the last 12 of those as an office manager and bookkeeper, for a small civil engineering firm in Sudbury. I retired at 52, not because I wanted to, but because my own mother got sick and needed care, and someone had to be available. I became that someone. After my mother passed, I did not go back to full-time work. Instead, I began doing part-time bookkeeping for small local businesses. A physiotherapy clinic, a landscape company, a family-run bakery. I know exactly what my time is worth. My hourly rate for bookkeeping is $45. For administrative work, $38. For tax preparation, I charge by the return. When Garrett was getting started, he and Petra, young couple, buying their first house, managing their first tax season as joint filers. Then the year the twins were born and everything got complicated. I had done their books for them, organized their RRSP contributions, tracked their childcare expenses for the CCTB, helped them prepare for the CRA's review of their home office deduction in 2021. That one alone took me 31 hours over 6 weeks. I had never charged them. We were family. I sat at my kitchen table and I opened my notebook and I started writing. I went back through my calendar. I keep detailed calendars, always have, and I began logging every hour of financial and administrative work I had done for Garrett and Petra since they were married. Tax seasons. The CRA review. The year they refinanced and needed all their financial documentation organized and submitted to the mortgage broker. The business expense tracking I'd done during a 6-month period. When Petra was doing a side business selling handmade goods and needed clean GST/HST records for her first filing, I worked through 2 cups of tea and most of a sleeve of crackers. I applied my standard hourly rate, which I considered conservative by at least 20%, given that I was applying it retroactively at the rates from each year, not at today's market rate. The total, across 6 years, was $88,400. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do. I pulled out Garrett and Petra's file. I still had everything organized in folders the way I always organize client files, and I reviewed what I actually knew about their financial situation. I had prepared enough of their documents over enough years to have a clear picture. They were comfortable, more than comfortable. I was not going to do anything improper with that information. That is not who I am. But I needed to understand, sitting there at that table, what I had given this family, and what had quietly been decided about what I was worth. I typed everything up that night. Itemized. Professional format. Every line supported by the calendar entries and correspondence I still had. I printed it. Then I wrote a letter, short, 3 paragraphs, clear, signed it. I sealed both documents in an envelope. I set my alarm for 7:15. And then, for the first time in a long time, I went to sleep without replaying the look on Isla's face. Garrett and Petra are early risers. They have to be with twins. I knew that by 8 in the morning, Garrett would be on his second coffee and the kids would be settled with their tablets. I drove the 40 minutes without the radio. The morning was gray and cold the way Sudbury mornings get in November. The birch trees stripped bare, the sky the color of old wool. I had worn my good coat, not to impress anyone, but because I have learned that the way you carry yourself in a difficult moment matters, and I wanted to carry myself well. Petra answered the door. She looked surprised, then immediately warm in the way she always is. Petra is not a cruel person, I want to be clear about that. She is a person who had decided, unconsciously or consciously, that I was the kind of woman who didn't need to be considered. That is a different thing. Diane, we weren't expecting. Is everything okay? Everything is fine, I said. I need to speak with both of you if Garrett's available. It won't take long. Garrett came out of the kitchen holding his mug. He looked like his father used to look. A little surprised, a little cautious, the way the men in my family have always looked when they sensed something was about to require their full attention. Mom? What's going on? I set the envelope on the counter between us. I need you to open that, I said. Petra reached for it first. She pulled out the invoice. I watched her face go from curious to confused to something I'd describe as very carefully composed. What is this? She asked. It's an itemized invoice, I said. For 6 years of bookkeeping, tax preparation, financial organization, and administrative services I provided to you both. The total is based on my standard professional rate, applied conservatively. Every line item is documented with dates and correspondences. Garrett had come to stand beside Petra. He was reading over her shoulder. He set down his mug. Mom, he said slowly, we're family. Yes, I said. And I love you very much. I also spent 31 hours managing your CRA review in 2021. I organized your mortgage refinancing documentation for 14 hours across 3 weeks. I have done your taxes every year since you were married. I did all of this because I love you, and because I believed that family meant we looked after each other. I paused. Yesterday your daughter, your niece, sat in your living room for an hour and watched her cousins open gifts while her name wasn't on a single tag. She is 6 years old. On the way home she asked me if she had been bad. She used those exact words. Grandma, was I bad? The kitchen was very quiet. I could hear the twins somewhere in the back of the house, the muffled sound of whatever they were watching. We didn't know Isla would be. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be. Petra started. I asked you in October, I said. I asked you directly if Isla should expect gifts. You said it would be casual. That is not the same as telling me she would be the only child in the room without anything. If you had told me that, I would have brought her something myself. Or I would have had a different conversation with you. Garrett put his hands on the counter. Mom, we're sorry about Isla, we genuinely are. That wasn't the intention. I believe you, I said. Intentions matter. So does what happened. I pulled the second document from the envelope. The letter. I want you to have this as well. Effective today, I'm withdrawing my financial and administrative support from your household on a volunteer basis. If you'd like to continue working with me, I'm happy to do that. But under a formal arrangement, compensated at my professional rate. I'll give you a proper transition. I'll organize everything clearly and make sure you have what you need to hand off to another bookkeeper if you prefer. But I won't be continuing the current arrangement. Petra's hand went to her mouth. Diane, I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm not here to shame you. But I have a granddaughter who needed to feel that she mattered to this family, and she didn't feel that yesterday. And I have spent 6 years feeling like what I give is expected rather than valued. Those two things happened on the same day, and I can't sit quietly with either of them. I picked up my bag. The invoice is not a demand for immediate payment, I said. It's documentation. It's a record of what my work was worth and what was never acknowledged. Keep it somewhere. Look at it when you need to. I walked to the door. Garrett called my name. I turned around. He looked the way his father used to look in moments that cost him something. Jaw tight, eyes direct, not defensive but genuinely reckoning with something. Did Esla really say that? He asked. Was I bad? Word for word, I said. She was sitting right beside me and she said it in the quietest voice. He nodded once, slowly. He didn't say anything else. Sometimes there's nothing to say yet. And you have to let a person sit with what they've heard. I left. The drive home was long. November light, gray and flat. The highway straight and empty, the way it gets on a weekday morning outside the city. My hands were steady on the wheel, but I pulled into a Tim Hortons outside of Lively and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I went in to order anything. I just needed to be still for a moment. Change is strange, even when it's overdue, even when you know with complete certainty that you did the right thing. Your body doesn't always know how to feel about it right away. I ordered a medium dark roast and sat by the window and watched the highway, and I thought, well, that's done. What happened in the weeks that followed was not what I expected, and I think I owe you the full picture. 2 days after the conversation, Sherry called me. She'd heard something through Garrett. I don't know exactly what was said and I haven't asked. But Sherry said she'd been thinking. She said, Mom, did you really count all those hours? Everyone, I said. There was a long pause. I've never asked you to keep track of the time you put in for Isla and me, she said. I know you don't want me to, but I want you to know I know. I know what you've given us. I don't think I've ever said it clearly enough. I had to put the phone down for a moment. You don't owe me anything, I said when I came back. I know, she said. I just wanted to say it. Garrett called me 4 days after my visit. Not to argue, not to explain. He asked if he could bring the twins to see me that weekend, and if Isla could come too. I said yes. They came on a Saturday. Garrett picked up Isla himself from Sherry's, which he had never done before. He brought a gift for her. Nothing extravagant. A puzzle with a Canadian wildlife theme, wolves, and moose and a loon on the cover. He got down on the kitchen floor with her and started it himself, while the twins spread out at the table with hot chocolate. Isla finished a whole section of the puzzle and then looked up at Garrett and said very seriously, You're good at this, he said. I had a good teacher. My mom used to do puzzles with me when I was your age. Isla looked over at me. She smiled the way she smiles when she doesn't have words for something. Small and real and complete. I held it together. I'm getting better at that. As for the invoice, Garrett and I have had one phone conversation about it since then. He didn't dispute the hours or the rate. He said he needed some time to think about what was fair and what was possible. I told him I appreciated that. I told him the conversation itself mattered more to me than the payment. And I meant that, though I want to be precise. I meant that the acknowledgement mattered. It does not mean the work was without value. Those are two different things. Petra sent me a text message 10 days after my visit. It said, I've been thinking about Thanksgiving a lot. I don't have a good explanation. I'm sorry. That was all. It was not a grand gesture. But it was real and she sent it herself, without Garrett asking her to, and that meant something. I haven't seen Petra's mother, Donna, since the holiday. That relationship will require more time and more conversation, and I'm not in a hurry to force it. Some things take the time they take. What I want to be careful about telling you this is not to make it sound cleaner than it was or is. My family is not fixed. Garrett and I are navigating something that doesn't have a neat resolution yet. There will be awkward holidays and careful conversations for a while. That's what real families look like when they're actually doing the work. But here is what I know. The most dangerous thing you can be in a family is easy to take for granted. And I was very easy to take for granted. I was dependable. I was always there. I never sent an invoice. I never said, "Do you know what this cost me?" I never asked, "Do you see me?" I spent 6 years being useful to my son's household, and in all that time, not once did anyone think to ask if I might want something acknowledged. A thank you in a card. A mention at the dinner table, anything. Not once, in all those years, did anyone consider that Isla sitting in that room without a gift might be a problem. Because Isla is mine, and I am the one who doesn't need anything extra. I had accepted that framing for so long that I had almost forgotten I had the option to refuse it. Isla doesn't know the full story. She's 6. What she knows is that Uncle Garrett came over and brought her a puzzle, and sat on the floor and did it with her, and that her grandma made hot chocolate with the little marshmallows, and that it was a good Saturday. That is enough for now. When she's older and she asks me, because she will ask, she is the kind of child who asks everything. I want her to see that her grandmother, at 54 years old, decided that being underestimated was a choice she was allowed to stop making. I want her to know that when someone tells you through their actions that you don't need to be considered, you are allowed to correct that assumption. Quietly, professionally, without raising your voice. You are allowed to walk back to your car in the November cold, with your head up and your invoice already delivered. I'll be honest with you about something else. There is a woman in my Sudbury neighborhood, a friend I've had for 15 years named Constance, and when I told her the whole story over coffee last week, she said, "Diane, how long have you been doing this?" And I said, 6 years for Garrett. My whole life for everyone else. She looked at me for a moment and then she said quietly, "And what did it cost you?" I didn't answer right away. I picked up my cup. I thought about the 31 hours I spent on the CRA review while Isla had the flu. And I was going back and forth between my laptop and her sick room with ginger ale and saltines. I thought about every tax season. I spent cross-referencing receipts for Garrett's household, while my own retirement planning sat in a folder on my desk, waiting for me to get to it. I thought about Thanksgiving, and burgundy dresses, and puzzles with wolves on the cover, and a 6-year-old asking if she had done something wrong. More than I counted, I said, but I'm counting now. If there is someone in your life who has been borrowing your dependability without ever asking the cost of it, I hope this gives you something to think about. The people who call you easygoing, low maintenance, always there, sometimes what they mean is that they have decided without consulting you that your needs can be moved to the bottom of the list, and you are allowed to move them back up. You are allowed to be valued, not just needed. Valued, and if the people in your life aren't sure what the difference is, an itemized invoice is a very clear way to explain it. This is Nova Payback. Because knowing what you're worth is where everything else begins.